Ever tried drinking from a fire hose?
Can't say I have.
Well, imagine that, but instead of water, it's compliance regulations. A little overwhelming,
Oh,
right?
yeah. That's why we're talking about risk-based compliance today, figuring out which threats really matter to your organization.
So instead of freaking out about every little thing, we figure out which icebergs to avoid, right?
Exactly.
And today's deep dive, all based on the stuff you sent us, it'll guide us through how to do that.
First step is playing detective, figuring out what those unique risks actually are.
Putting on our Sherlock Holmes hats and examining every corner of the organization.
Well, maybe not every corner, but we do map out each function.
Finance, HR, IT, all that.
Yep. And then we ask, what could go wrong here?
Okay, I'm with you. Data breaches in IT, a rogue employee in HR cooking the books, maybe even a marketing campaign that accidentally offends the entire internet.
You got it. Then we categorize these issues. Regulatory risks, like GDPR violations. Financial risks, like fraud. Operational risks, like system failures.
Yeah.
And yeah, even reputational risks, like that internet offending campaign.
But it's not just listing out every nightmare scenario, right? We need to figure out which of these are going to keep us up at night.
That's where the risk matrix comes in. It's a tool to visualize the level of danger each risk has.
A danger chart.
Basically, we look at each risk based on its impact,
Hmm.
how much damage it could really cause, and its likelihood, how probable it is to actually happen.
So not all risks are created equal.
Right.
Give me an example, something specific to paint the picture.
Let's say your organization handles personal data, customer info, employee records, that kind of thing.
Okay.
Non-compliance with data privacy regulations like GDPR could have a huge GE impact. Hefty fines, lawsuits, reputational damage, real nightmare scenario.
Sounds like it.
And depending on your data security measures, it might even be pretty likely. That's high impact, high likelihood. Goes right at the top of our matrix.
Definite red flashing siren on the risk dashboard. But what about something less dramatic, like an employee accidentally leaks confidential info, but, on a smaller scale?
Great example. While that's still a concern, the impact's probably much lower than a full-blown GDPR violation. And depending on your internal training and security protocols, it might not be as likely. So that'd be lower on our matrix, requiring a different approach.
So we've mapped the risks, we know where the danger zones are, time to call in the troops and build some defenses, right?
You got it.
Okay.
Mitigation strategies, they're the shields we put up against those high-impact, high-likelihood risks.
Okay.
Remember that GDPR violation? Well, we might do rigorous data encryption, multi-factor authentication, mandatory employee training on data protection, multiple layers of defense to minimize the chance of a breach ever happening.
So we're not just trying to prevent these risks entirely, but also having a plan in place if, despite our best efforts, they do happen.
Exactly. And the specific mitigation strategies are going to vary depending on the nature of each risk and its position on the matrix.
Makes sense.
For example, a financial risk, like fraud, that might need strengthening internal controls, doing more frequent audits, implementing robust fraud detection systems.
So it's starting to feel less like a fire hose and more like a well-organized sprinkler system, directing our efforts where they'll have the biggest impact. But is this a one-time thing? We just assess risks, build our defenses, call it a day.
That's where things get really interesting. And it's also where we'll leave you hanging until part 2.
Ooh, a cliffhanger. Don't worry, listener. We'll be back soon to reveal all.
That fire hose of regulations we talked about. Well, the stream never really stops. The risk landscape is constantly shifting, new technologies, regulations evolve, and even your own organization's growth. It all adds complexity.
So it's not a set it and forget it kind of thing, but constantly reassessing everything sounds exhausting.
There's a better way. Think of it like setting up motion sensors around your organization. We establish key risk indicators, or KRIs. They act as early warning signals.
Okay, I like that. Motion sensors, tell me more.
Imagine a dashboard with all these dials and gauges, each one representing a specific risk area.
Okay.
Let's say you're really worried about data breaches. A relevant KRI might be the number of failed login attempts on your system.
So if that number suddenly jumps up, it's a sign that someone might be trying to break in.
Exactly. Or let's say you're worried about fraud in your financial transactions. A KRI could be the number of transactions outside a certain dollar amount, or ones happening outside of regular business hours. A sudden increase there might need looking into.
These KRIs are like the canaries in the coal mine of compliance. I love it. But even with these early warning systems, we got to stay informed, right?
Absolutely. Regular check-ins with different departments are key. Imagine your sales team mentions that competitors are suddenly approving contracts way faster,
Okay.
potentially cutting corners on compliance checks.
That's a big red flag. Could mean they're taking shortcuts that put them and maybe their clients at risk.
Exactly. Or maybe your IT team tells you about a new phishing scam, one that's targeting businesses in your industry. This constant flow of info helps you adapt your compliance strategy.
So it's about having a network of informed eyes and ears across the entire organization, feeding back all those valuable insights.
Exactly. And all this monitoring and adapting, it's not just about avoiding problems.
Yeah.
It can actually make your organization better.
Now that's an idea I can get behind. How does risk management actually lead to improvement?
But you're always evaluating and managing risks. You're essentially holding a magnifying glass to everything you do.
Forcing you to look at each process, each decision, with a critical eye.
Exactly. That can uncover inefficiencies, redundancies. You can see where you can streamline operations, saving time and resources.
So it's like a continuous improvement program.
You got it. And sometimes confronting a potential risk can spark innovation. Let's say you find a weak point in your supply chain.
Okay, yeah.
This could push you to explore new suppliers or even come up with more resilient supply chain models.
Necessity is the mother of invention, as they say.
Exactly. And the benefits go beyond just efficiency and innovation. A strong risk management framework can actually boost your organization's reputation.
No, that's interesting. How so?
Think about it from your stakeholders' point of view. Customers, investors, even potential employees. They want to know you're taking steps to protect their interests, their data, their investments.
It shows them that you're a trustworthy organization.
Exactly. It shows a commitment to ethical and responsible business, which can be a real advantage these days.
It's like a seal of approval, showing everyone you're serious about managing risk.
Exactly. But let's be real. Putting a robust risk management program in place, it's not a walk in the park.
Let's talk about those hurdles. What gets in the way?
One of the biggest is getting buy-in from the top. Leadership sometimes sees risk management as just another expense or a bureaucratic headache.
Yeah, I get that, especially when things move fast and speed's more important than caution.
Right. It's important to emphasize that good risk management can actually save money in the long run by preventing costly mistakes, reputation damage. Think of it as an investment, not a cost.
And highlight those strategic benefits we discussed, right? Better decision-making, continuous improvement, and a stronger reputation.
Absolutely. Another common challenge is data. Sometimes too much, sometimes not enough, sometimes the wrong kind.
Data overload.
Yeah, sometimes organizations are swimming in data but can't figure out what it all means for the risk assessments. Or they just don't have the data they need to make good decisions. It's about having the right data, the right tools, and the right people to analyze it.
And I imagine keeping up with all the regulations is tough, too.
It really is. It's a moving target, and it's tough for organizations, especially smaller ones with limited resources, to stay ahead of the curve.
So we've covered the importance of risk management, the tools, the challenges, but there's one piece missing.
It's often overlooked, but it can make or break even the best risk management plan.
Another cliffhanger. Come on.
You'll have to join us for part 3 to find out.
Listener, you'll have to join us for part 3 to discover this final piece of the puzzle. All right, listener, welcome back to our risk-based compliance deep dive. We've mapped out the risks, talked about defenses, even those early warning systems, the KRIs. But there's one last thing to uncover, a piece that's often overlooked.
It's the human element.
The human element.
Yeah, that unpredictable factor that can really mess up even the most sophisticated risk management plans.
You mean like when someone accidentally hits reply all on a confidential email?
That's one example, but I'm talking about something a little deeper. The cognitive biases that can really cloud our judgment when we're assessing and managing risk.
Okay, I'm all ears. Tell me about these biases.
Our brains are wired for efficiency. We use these mental shortcuts, heuristics, to make decisions quickly.
Makes sense.
They're useful, but they can lead to biases, especially when dealing with something as complex as risk.
So our brains are trying to help, but sometimes they trip us up.
Exactly. One common one is confirmation bias.
Confirmation bias.
We tend to favor information that confirms what we already believe, even if the evidence says otherwise.
So if we think a risk is unlikely, we might downplay any data that suggests otherwise.
Right. Or you might overestimate how effective our strategies are because we're so confident in our plan. We see what we want to see.
And that can be dangerous. Any other biases we should watch out for?
Availability bias is another big one.
Availability.
We overestimate the likelihood of things that are easy to remember or happen recently.
So if there's been a big data breach in our industry, we might fixate on that scenario, even if other risks are more likely to hit us.
Exactly. It's like that saying, once bitten, twice shy. But in risk management, we have to use data, objective analysis, not just gut feelings.
Okay, so these biases, they're the enemy. How do we fight back? How do we de-bias our risk management?
First step is awareness. Just knowing these biases exist can help us be more critical of our own thinking.
So self-awareness is key. What else?
Getting multiple people involved in the risk assessment process. Different perspectives can help challenge assumptions, see the blind spots.
Like a risk management brainstorm.
Exactly. And it's not just the initial assessment. Got to create a culture where people can speak up, challenge things, bring up new info as it comes up.
That goes back to building a culture of compliance where everyone's involved. But how do we encourage that kind of thinking, that open communication?
Trainings are crucial. We got to teach people about these biases, how they sneak in, and how to mitigate them.
So it's not just about the rules, but giving them the tools to think critically about risk.
Exactly. We can even make it fun. Case studies, simulations, games, all that can help people recognize and deal with their own biases.
Like a risk management boot camp for the mind. I like it. Any other tools or techniques we can use?
Technology is a big help. There are programs designed to de-bias risk assessments.
Really?
Some use algorithms to analyze data and find biases, while others use things like blind assessments to prevent us from being swayed by irrelevant stuff.
Wow, using technology to outsmart our own brains. This whole conversation's been eye-opening, really makes you appreciate the whole risk management thing.
It's definitely not just checking boxes. It's a process that's always changing. Needs strategic thinking and a good understanding of, well, human nature.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Listener, I hope this deep dive has given you some insights, maybe even a new sense of confidence when tackling risk management.
It's not just about avoiding problems. It's about building an organization that's resilient, adaptable, and successful.
And on that note, thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Until next time, stay curious and stay vigilant.